All right, guys, it's Drew again. Back with another question for the current Free 120. So last year's version. This is number 91. So we're going to start with, like I always say, reading the last line of the question to help us kind of frame where we're at. So the last line of this question is, which of the following is the most likely explanation for this patient's nighttime symptoms? So right away, we know that this is going to be like a pathophysiology question. So if we're looking at the answers, it's going to be endocrine related. Hypoglycemia, potentially diabetes. We'll see. So just kind of framing our mind to think about that stuff. So now for the question. So a 4-year-old girl with type 1 diabetes is brought to the emergency department by her father because of a 4-hour episode of restlessness, sweating, and confusion that occurred during the night. Yesterday, he allowed her to eat cupcakes and cotton candy at a county fair. At her bedtime that evening, he increased her dose of subcutaneous intermediate-acting and long-acting insulin. Her symptoms began 6 hours later and then resolved spontaneously. After being informed this morning of the nighttime episode, the mother insisted that the father bring the patient to the hospital. On arrival, the patient is alert. Her vital signs are within normal limits. Examination shows no abnormalities, and her fingerstick blood glucose is 72 milligrams per deciliter. Urinalysis is negative for glucose and ketones. Which of the following is the most likely explanation for this patient's nighttime symptoms? So, highlighting a few of the key points here. One, the patient has a history of type 1 diabetes, and that her symptoms were restlessness, sweating, and confusion. So we typically, and then they give us two sentences here that could kind of lead us into the wrong direction versus the right direction. So the first sentence is that he allowed her to eat cupcakes and cotton candy at a county fair. So automatically you're thinking, okay, she had too many carbohydrates. This must be a hyperglycemic problem. But then it says he increased her dose of subcutaneous intermediate acting and long acting insulin. Well, if you give too much insulin, we know that's going to cause hypoglycemia. So what we have to do here is kind of correlate those sentences with her symptoms. And then if we look down here and see her finger prick blood glucose is 72. So, on the lower side, definitely not hyperglycemic. So I think we can go ahead and eliminate some answers here. I'll walk you through how I did that. Essentially, the symptoms of hypoglycemia are generally what they describe here: restlessness, sweating, confusion. Hyperglycemia, on the other hand, you're usually going to get a description of, polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia, maybe some blurred vision. Those are typical of hyperglycemia. So, we can go ahead and eliminate the first three here, given that those are hyperglycemia. If we just skip down and look at nightmare and sleep terror disorder, this is not painting a picture of either of those. Sleep terror disorder is where you act out in your dreams, or not even dreams, but you act out, but you don't remember anything the next morning. Nightmare disorder is where you have a very scary nightmare and you wake up, you can remember it, but then you're able to fall back asleep. So neither of those are described in this case. So now that we've kind of narrowed it down to this is hypoglycemia, we have to figure out what's the underlying mechanism behind the hypoglycemia. So, hypoglycemia caused by excessive exogenous insulin. Could that be a possibility? Well, yes, because the question stem told us that the father increased the dose of subcutaneous intermediate acting and long acting insulin. Hypoglycemia caused by excessive renal glucose loss. So we can eliminate this one for a couple of reasons. One being, uh, if you're going to lose glucose through your kidneys or kidney function, that's going to be more of a chronic condition, and that wouldn't explain this patient's uh, acute symptoms of restlessness, sweating, and confusion. Two, it tells us here in the stem that the urinalysis is negative for glucose and ketones, which, if it was trying to point us in the direction of something with the kidneys, that sentence would not be there. So we can eliminate E. Finally, we're down between D and F. So if we go look at F, hypoglycemia caused by increased glucagon secretion. Well, if we remember from our physiology lectures, glucagon actually increases the amount of glucose in the bloodstream. Remember, it opposes insulin. So this would not cause hypoglycemia. That would cause hyperglycemia. So that one is wrong. So that leaves us with choice D here. Father giving excess is exogenous insulin to the daughter caused her to be hypoglycemic. And that is it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know.